Hey, it's Darcy, and today we are doing my March wrap-up. We are filming on the webcam today just to kind of simplify the process a bit, try to make it go a bit faster, because I'm heading to New Zealand tomorrow. It'll be my first time going overseas as an adult, and I'm very excited, but that means I'm short on time. So if all goes well today, you should be seeing this while I'm in New Zealand. So we're gonna put up with webcam quality for today, and it is daytime, so the lighting's probably going to be constantly changing. But we're here to talk about the books I read in March, and that's what matters. I read 8 things in March. I didn't have any 5 stars, so it wasn't as brilliant a month reading-wise as the month previous, but I did still enjoy some things. I just didn't find anything that I, loved. As usual, a bit of a mix of genres, things like that, and otherwise I did get up to a whole bunch of stuff in March, some of which you may have seen because I did post a couple of vlogs in March. I went to Sydney for Mardi Gras, had my monthly Melbourne Friends meet, all of that good stuff. I'm also finally an officially registered teacher, a fully registered teacher after too many years of teaching. So yeah, as always, lots going on. I can also now officially announce that I'm going to be at DreamHack Melbourne, which is a gaming convention at the end of this month, at the end of April. I'm going to be there as a creator. So if you're in Melbourne, maybe consider going to that convention. You could see me do some fun gaming stuff. I know there's esports and Artist Alley and lots of fun things. So that's a thing. I'll be officially at a convention as a creator for the first time. But yeah, let's just get right on into these books. If I can deal with the fact that the sun keeps completely changing what it's doing every 5 seconds. I've got my blinds down and everything, and it doesn't really make a difference when it comes to webcams. So sensitive. So first of all, my book club read for March was A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers, which is a little sci-fi novella. In April, we are reading, I think it's called Delicious Monsters, which is a YA horror. But A Psalm for the Wild Built is a little novella about a human and a robot kind of just having conversations for the most part, because we're at a point in time where robots went off to do their own thing and separated for humans, and so humans and robots haven't interacted for many years until this robot wants to learn about what humans have been up to, and so goes and talks to this tea monk. So it overall has a very kind of cozy, casual vibe. There's not necessarily a lot of action or anything happening, and I will say at first I was not vibing with this book. I was a little bit bored and what's going on? But then as soon as the robot showed up, I was on board. I love that little guy. Not really a guy. I think it was established that robots don't have gender, but it was just so wholesome and there was a vibe. So I did really enjoy this book once that picked up. And because it just got kind of funny. There was some good-natured connection between these two characters in this exploration of what it was to be human or what it was to be a robot, and just understanding each other, and all of those kind of things were explored in it, and it was really lovely by the end. Again, because it was difficult for me to get into the book, it's not a 5 stars and not a new favorite. I did still really enjoy it by the end. Basically, because I really enjoyed it as soon as the robot made an appearance. That's kind of how I felt about that one. And I don't think I was the only one who felt that way in our book club space of kind of not vibing with this book when it started as well. And some people were considering DNFing it, but it was it does pick up. It does pick up. Mostly just, I don't know, I can very much be carried by characters I really enjoy. So if there's a character, even if they're not doing a whole lot, if I really enjoy that character, I'm vibing. So that was a really short read for this month that was still ended up being a lot of fun. Non-fiction for the month was The Philosophy of Video Games, which is basically a bunch of little short essays about video games. Unlike the Final Fantasy book I read recently, that was a similar type of concept, I liked this one a lot more. I felt like it was actually exploring concepts of games and not just telling me the plot of the games. And it had a bunch of major titles, it looked at Fallout and a few other things. And so it was just an interesting little thing to engage with, a little little fun little non-fiction thing to listen to, these explorations of these concepts in video games and how they're exploring like just human experience and things like that. I also read an arc of Funny Story by Emily Henry, and I didn't like this. I think this book comes out in April. Don't ask me what date, but I think it comes out this month. I could be wrong there. But I said I read an arc, so I got to read this in advance. I had an ebook through NetGalley, and I have loved some of Emily Henry's books in the past, and I did talk about this in a vlog as well, so I feel like I've kind of discussed my feelings to an extent already, but I just didn't love this. Like, it was just fine. It wasn't like a terrible book or anything. Like, it was still enjoyable overall to an extent, but it was kind of just fine, which is particularly disappointing when it's an author whose other romances you've loved. In saying that, this wasn't as... There is one Emily Henry I really didn't like, the Vacation one. I really disliked that book. So this one I will say is a step above that because I didn't dislike it. But it was really disappointing because 3 other of the author's books I've rated 5 stars and 2 of them have made me cry because I got so emotionally attached. Where this one, I had like no emotional connection. I didn't really vibe with the characters. I didn't like the setup because you've got these 2 roommates who kind of enter into a fake dating situation specifically to make their exes jealous or to get a kind of reaction out of the exes or to make the exes feel like they're moving on or some, you know, that kind of vibe because their exes broke up with them to get together, basically. So the way all of that played out, I wasn't really jiving with, especially since like every time they kissed, it was like in front of the exes and all of that. I don't know. I just didn't like that whole situation. And as I said, I didn't really super vibe with the characters themselves. They weren't really characters I felt any connection to personally, weren't really my vibe. And so yeah, I didn't really love how this one played out and I just didn't care by the end. As I said, I had some fun at points, but by the end of this book, I just didn't care. So it was just fine. And so that left me feeling really just kind of disappointed, to be honest, because of how much I've loved previous books. But, you know, not a bad romance, but just not an amazing romance. The lighting's so off you can barely even tell that my hair is purple at the moment. I read 2 other romances through Kindle Unlimited this month. I read Escaping Wonderland by Tiffany Roberts, which I'd actually started in a previous month and then forgotten about and then thought, oh, I might as well finish it. So Escaping Wonderland is obviously inspired to an extent by Alice in Wonderland, except Wonderland is like a virtual reality space that inmates of this psychiatric facility are kind of forced into. And our main character, who's the Alice-like character, has been forced into this psychiatric facility by her like step family, basically. And this could have been good and just a silly little fun smutty romance type situation, but the thing I really struggled with about this is that there was so much SA. Like, there was a lot implied in terms of like how the world was run, about things that would happen to women and how they were treated, but then there were also in-page instances of the main character being assaulted to various extents. And especially when in some cases it was used as like a plot point or kind of just glossed over. I don't know, it made me really uncomfortable. So I don't know that I could say that I enjoyed this book by the end. Because especially like relatively close to the end, there was an instance where like, you know, she was... There was this particular instance, like quite close to the end, that was a pretty bad instance of her being violated. And it was kind of played off like, well, she had to go through that so that they could get through this area. But then, like, the male love interest attacked them anyway. So it was like, why did any of that happen? I don't know. And Tiffany Roberts wrote that... I can't even remember what the series is called, but the like Spider Alien series, which I actually really like that as a monster alien romance series. But yeah, this I struggled with, and so I did not like it by the end, because why was there so much of that? Like, how am I supposed to enjoy a romance if all of that is happening? And I know, like, dark romance is a thing, but, like, unnecessary instances of on-page assault in that situation, I don't want it. I don't want it. It doesn't need to be there. Thank you. And the other little romance I read on Kindle Unlimited, which was a monster romance, was Luxuria by Colette Rhodes, which is set in this kind of like urban fantasy type world where there are hunters and then there are these like shadow demon creatures. I've already forgotten what they were called. Shades, I think. And so like the hunters obviously hunt and try to kill all the shades when they're in the human world, but then the shades have to come to the human world because they need to like feed on fear to survive. And then we've got this situation of a marriage that happens between a hunter who had been ostracized, and then the like king of the shades as part of a like a diplomatic truce type situation. And so it's obviously a romance between them, and this was fun enough. I didn't necessarily love everything that was happening or how it happened. Like, I don't know, characters that are just like willfully ignorant of the things that are happening around them and are making like silly rash decisions based on that. Like, that always frustrates me so much. But otherwise, this was a cute enough fun time. It was fine. It was fun. It was fine. I didn't love it, but I had a good enough time. It's basically how I felt about that. Lastly, let's get into the 3 things I actually read physically this month. One was volume 6 of Tokyo Ghoul. I've also talked about this in a vlog. I'm really enjoying this manga series where we've got ghouls and humans that are trying to hunt and kill all the ghouls, and the ghouls that are trying to stay undercover but then like eat people to survive. And then you've got this character who's half ghoul, half human because he got a like transplant that was actually came from a ghoul, and you know, all the things happening there, and it's just a good paranormal time. It can be quite like dark and disturbing at times, but it's also just a fun time, and I love this kind of paranormal nonsense. So I'm having a really good time with this volume. Hasn't been not one of my favorite volumes so far, but I'm still enjoying this series, and I will be continuing to read Tokyo Ghoul. The Invocations by Crystal Sutherland, a YA horror that I read. This is also like a new release that I decided to read because I saw my school library had it. But I've been wanting to read it anyway because this author wrote House of Hollow that I really enjoyed years back when I read that as well. And this I enjoyed as well. Probably not as much as House of Hollow, but I still really enjoyed this. You've got these 3 characters who are drawn together trying to find out what is happening in respect to the murder of a bunch of witches, or these girls who have like curses on them, these things that give them power, and one of these girls is the one who has been giving out these powers to the girls and the women. One of them is someone who has a kind of nasty curse, and then there's another girl who that rain is so loud. There's another girl who's trying to find out who's trying to resurrect her sister, because her sister was one of the first girls that was murdered. So they're drawn together because of this, and it's a lot of like men are terrible and you can't trust them, which was a little heavy-handed at times, especially by the end. Like, as much as some of it, you know, is definitely rooted in our reality, by the end it did feel a little bit like, I don't know, I didn't know how to feel by the end, because it truly is like all men are horrible. Basically, I don't think there was a single redeeming man or boy in this book by the end, which is, you know, fine. It is a book kind of about that kind of feminine rage or defending each other and, you know, female friendships and all that stuff that's beautiful. But I also just don't know how I feel about how everything wrapped up at the end and all the things that were revealed at the end, to a certain extent. And I can't really talk much more about it without being like really spoilery, but I did have mixed feelings about that, I'll admit. But overall, I had a good time with this. It had a really nice pace to it where I was like constantly engaged and wanting to keep reading. And I always love seeing those kind of building relationships and female friendships and things like that. It also had a slight, just a little sprinkle of sapphicness in there. And yeah, I did have a good time in this one overall. As much as it seems like I'm just criticizing it, I did have a good time. It had a good pace, it was engaging, it was interesting, witchy vibes, you know, murder mystery vibes, all of those kind of elements that were wrapped up into it that I did really enjoy. And then last thing quickly, Dungeons & Dragons Yearbook 2024. I bought this while I was in Sydney for Mardi Gras. It's very much something that feels like you're reading a magazine, because like it's just got random stuff in it. Like here's a section on factions, here's a section on like tank classes, playing in alternative settings, meet the creators, and there's like, you know, people who run games and have like an online presence and things like that. So it's just a bunch of little bits and pieces to do with Dungeons & Dragons, both the game itself and also I guess how it's kind of expanded into something bigger to a certain extent. Like it's quite short. As I said, it does just feel like you're reading a magazine about Dungeons & Dragons, really. But like, I enjoyed this for what it was, and it's just one of those things that makes me very aware of how long it has been since I played Dungeons & Dragons, and how I really need to get back into it. But, you know, who has the time? Since a girl who can't stop picking up new hobbies, because I should have brought them in here, but I did also crochet 3 plush for the first time yesterday. That if you follow me on any other socials, you've probably seen. I have a problem. I see a thing and go, yeah, I could learn to do that. Those are the books I read. As I said, I didn't find any like new favorites, but there were definitely some things I enjoyed and some things that I had problems with. It was a very mixed month for my reading, but next month I will definitely be reading, obviously, my book club read, which is that YA horror. I also have to read Education in Malice, because that's my book club buddy read with Ali and Vanessa that I have to read next month. Well, this month. It is now April. I also really want to get to the Lair of Dreams, the sequel to The Diviners, because we read that recently and I really enjoyed it, and I have actually started that. Anyway, we'll see how my reading goes in April. But yeah, as you can, I'm a little bit all over the place, if you couldn't tell, because I've been so wrapped up in trying to think about New Zealand and what I need to do and what I need to pack and do I have everything? I've never been overseas before as an adult. I don't know what I'm doing. But anyways, hopefully the visual quality of this video has not bothered you too much. But otherwise, that's going to be it from me today. TTFN and Stasi out.